Welcome to another BHY Solutions Deep Dive.
hmm
Today we're going to be unpacking some really fascinating ideas from Dr. Yusufi, and specifically this idea of the lizard brain
Yeah, okay.
and how it impacts our decision-making at work.
Really interesting concept, I think. This idea that we're all walking around with this ancient primal part of our brains that's constantly scanning for threats.
Yeah, it's like having a tiny caveman living in our skulls, right? I mean, I get why it was helpful back when we were, dodging saber-toothed tigers,
Right.
but a board meeting, that's not exactly a life or death situation.
Right, but that's the thing. Your lizard brain, or to use the more scientific term, the amygdala and basal regions, doesn't really distinguish between a physical threat and a perceived threat.
Okay.
So anything that triggers that sense of fear or uncertainty can set it off. Think about tight deadlines, critical feedback from your boss, or even just the pressure to perform well in a presentation.
So it's like our brains are stuck in a time warp. We're dealing with modern-day stresses, but reacting with this ancient fight or flight response.
Exactly. And that can lead to all sorts of challenges, especially in the workplace. One of the biggest ones is risk aversion. Have you ever noticed how some people just shut down at the mere mention of trying something new?
Oh, absolutely. They'd rather stick with the familiar, even if it's not working that well, than venture into uncharted territory.
That's the lizard brain in action. It sees any potential for failure as a threat to survival, so it screams danger and pushes you towards the safe, comfortable option, even if that option isn't really in your best interest long term.
So basically, my lizard brain is the reason I always order the same thing at my favorite restaurant.
Well, maybe. But on a more serious note, this risk aversion can really stifle innovation and creativity in a work environment. Think about it: if everyone is too afraid to try new things or challenge the status quo, how can a company grow and adapt?
Makes sense. You mentioned risk aversion. I'm curious how this lizard brain hijack affects people in leadership positions.
That's a great question. When a leader's lizard brain is running the show, you often see a very controlling, micromanaging style. They're terrified of losing control of things going wrong, so they try to manage every little detail.
I've definitely worked for bosses like that.
Yeah,
They can really suck the energy out of a team.
absolutely. They create this atmosphere of fear and anxiety where people are afraid to take risks, to speak up, or to share their ideas. It's not exactly a recipe for a thriving, innovative workplace.
And what about the long game? Does the lizard brain kind of mess with our ability to think strategically and make decisions that are good for the future?
Oh, absolutely. The lizard brain is all about immediate survival. It's like, let's just get through this presentation, this deadline, this meeting, and it doesn't really care about what happens 6 months or a year down the road.
It's like that saying, penny wise and pound foolish, right? We get so focused on avoiding short-term discomfort that we end up making choices that hurt us in the long run.
Exactly. And you see this playing out in companies all the time. They might choose the cheapest option for a project to save money in the short term, but then end up paying more in the long run because of quality issues or maintenance costs. Or they might avoid investing in employee development because it seems expensive now, but then they lose valuable talent down the road because people feel undervalued and unchallenged.
It's like that old Aesop's fable about the ant and the grasshopper.
Yeah.
The lizard brain is the grasshopper just partying it up in the summer while the ant is working hard to prepare for winter.
That's a great analogy. But here's the thing. We're not destined to be at the mercy of our lizard brains forever. There are things we can do to tame the beast, so to speak, and make more conscious, rational decisions that are good for ourselves and our organizations.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. I'm curious to know how we can actually work with this primal part of our brains instead of letting it run the show.
Well, the first step is awareness. We need to start paying attention to those moments when our lizard brain is kicking in. Do you feel your heart racing when your boss gives you critical feedback? Do you get defensive when someone challenges your ideas?
Oh, that's me all the time.
Yeah.
So what do I do when I notice that happening? Do I just yell down, lizard brain down?
I wish it were that easy. But it's a great start to simply recognize those lizard brain reactions for what they are. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Mindfulness. Is this where we all start chanting Om in the middle of a meeting?
Not necessarily, though. I'm all for incorporating meditation into the workday if that works for you. But mindfulness in this context is really about paying attention to your thoughts and feelings in the present moment without judgment. It's about noticing those knee-jerk fear reactions and hitting the pause button before you react.
That makes sense, but how do we actually do that? It's not like I can just tell my lizard brain to chill out.
You'd be surprised. One technique Dr. Yusufi recommends is something called thought labeling. It's super simple, but powerful. Whenever you notice a thought or feeling popping up, you just mentally label it. So you might say to yourself, okay, that's anxiety I'm feeling right now, or that's my lizard brain telling me to run away from this challenge.
Interesting. So just by acknowledging those thoughts and feelings, we can start to create some space between them and our actions.
Exactly. It's like you're becoming an observer of your own mind, and that allows you to make more conscious choices instead of just reacting automatically.
So mindfulness is like giving ourselves a little breathing room to make a smarter decision, instead of just going with our gut, which is often our lizard brain in disguise.
You got it. Now remember, this is just one technique. There are many other mindfulness practices you can explore. The key is to find what works for you and start incorporating it into your daily routine. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing or meditation each day can make a huge difference.
That sounds manageable. And I bet it's a lot easier than trying to outrun a saber-toothed tiger, right?
Definitely. And the benefits go way beyond just taming your lizard brain. Mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress, improve focus, and even boost creativity. It's like a superpower for your brain.
Wow, I'm definitely going to have to look into this more. Now, you mentioned that awareness is the first step in taming the lizard brain. What else can we do to keep that little caveman in check?
Well, another powerful strategy is to shift your focus to the long term. Remember, the lizard brain is obsessed with immediate survival. But if you can connect to the bigger picture, to your long-term goals and aspirations, it helps to counter that short-term thinking.
So instead of getting caught up in the day-to-day anxieties, we need to remind ourselves why we're doing this work in the first place.
Yes. And setting clear goals and sticking to them is crucial. When you have a clear vision of where you're going, it's easier to resist those impulsive lizard brain urges. Dr. Yusufi talks about this a lot. He emphasizes the importance of having a personal mission statement, something that reminds you of your values and what you're working towards. It's like your North Star guiding you through the storms of daily life.
I love that. It's like taking a step back and remembering what truly matters. It's so easy to get caught up in the minutia and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But sometimes, even with the best intentions, we still get stuck in that fear zone. What about those times when the lizard brain is screaming danger, even when we know logically that there's no real threat?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another crucial strategy for taming the lizard brain, creating a safe space for risk-taking.
Ooh, this is so important, especially in the business world. If people are constantly afraid to fail, they're never going to come up with truly innovative ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make experimentation and failure, okay? It's all part of the learning process. When we create a culture where people feel safe trying new things, even if they don't always work out, we unleash a tremendous amount of creativity and potential. Think of it like this. If you're learning to ride a bike, you're going to fall a few times. It's inevitable. But you don't give up, right? You get back on and keep practicing until you master it.
That's a great analogy. But how do we create that kind of environment in a workplace, especially when there's so much pressure to succeed?
It starts with leadership. Leaders need to model that behavior themselves. They need to be willing to take risks, to admit when they've made mistakes, and to encourage their teams to do the same. And it's not just about saying the right words, it's about creating systems and structures that support risk-taking. For example, you could have a failure awards ceremony where you celebrate the most valuable lessons learned from failed projects. Or you could encourage employees to dedicate a certain percentage of their time to experimenting with new ideas, even if those ideas don't directly relate to their current projects.
Those are great ideas. I'm also a big fan of feedback loops, where teams can openly discuss what worked and what didn't when taking risks. It creates a learning culture where people feel safe to experiment.
Exactly. It's all about shifting the mindset from failure is bad to failure is an opportunity to learn. Dr. Yousefi calls this reframing failure. He encourages people to view setbacks as data points, valuable information that can help them improve and innovate. And remember, this applies to you as an individual as well. When you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up. Instead, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I do better next time? This kind of growth mindset is essential for taming the lizard brain and reaching your full potential.
So it's about turning that inner critic into an inner coach. Instead of berating ourselves for messing up, we can use those experiences as fuel for growth.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another important strategy for taming the lizard brain: training.
Training? What kind of training are we talking about? Do I need to sign my lizard brain up for obedience school?
Ha! I wish it were that simple. But we can actually train our rational brains to be stronger, more resilient, and better equipped to handle those instinctual fear responses. Programs focused on critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and stress management can be incredibly valuable. Dr. Yousefi talks a lot about the importance of developing these skills. He emphasizes that these are not just soft skills. They're essential for success in today's complex world.
So it's about giving ourselves the tools and techniques we need to make more informed, rational decisions, even when the pressure is on.
Yes. And it's not just about formal training programs. You can also develop these skills through reading podcasts like this one, and even just by consciously practicing them in your daily life. For example, you could try challenging your own assumptions more often, or you could practice active listening, really trying to understand other people's perspectives before jumping in with your own.
So training our rational brains is like building up our mental muscle so we can wrestle that lizard brain into submission when it starts acting up.
Exactly. It's about empowering your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning decision making and impulse control. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And that's key for overcoming those lizard brain impulses.
It sounds like we're giving ourselves an upgrade, trading in that old lizard brain operating system for something a little more sophisticated.
Precisely. And the more you work at it, the easier it becomes to make those thoughtful, strategic decisions, even when you're under pressure. And that ultimately is what will allow you to thrive in your career and in life.
This is all great stuff. I'm already feeling more empowered to take charge of my own lizard brain.